Okay, I'm liking this. But it's a bit different than most of the previous bumper tracks. It has more color, more intrigue, more tension. What's up with that? This is Music Student 101. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips, to tell you what's up with that.
Hey, Matt, what's up, man?
Jeremy, how's it going?
Going good. What did you think about that bumper music this time around?
That was cool, man. That was kind of avant-garde. We're getting sophisticated in our chord progressions here.
It's very much unlike anything I would normally do, and that's because I'm learning about some stuff or being reminded of some stuff that I learned about a long time ago that I haven't not touched since. So that was kind of fun. And another thing, I should probably pat myself on the back a little bit here, and the fellow musicians who have helped me throughout the years, mainly my brother Chris Burns, Brian Malloy, Jerome Chapman, Daniel Long, anyone, yourself, who's been contributing to these bumper tracks. But this one is the 300th bumper track that I've made since I've been in this house.
Woohoo!
So yeah, I moved in 2008, and here we are, 2018. 10 years, 300 compositions, averaging 30 a year. Doesn't seem like a whole lot now, but I'm pretty stoked about that.
That's a lot.
I haven't thought of a name for it yet. We'll have to think
And
of a
keeping
name.
those things fresh is also that's a challenge.
Yeah, totally.
Listeners, doing it's only, even if it's only 30 seconds, but doing 30 seconds every week or so.
Hey, it's kept me on my toes a lot, actually. It's really got my music chops up a good bit.
Well, there you go.
I would recommend you guys start your own theory podcast and try and record bumper tracks for it based on your content.
Oh yeah. To teach us to learn again.
Yeah, totally. Well, this again, like always, or like most times, this bumper track has some information that we're about to be talking about in this coming episode.
Indeed.
But first, tell me a little bit about what you did over the weekend. You said you kind of did something cool, didn't you?
I went to a great presentation at a local library here about our region's folk music and labor songs and some of the musical traditions that came out of the Birmingham area, specifically centered around Sloss Furnace, which is it is now a historical site in town. It used to be an old pig iron blast furnace back in the day. Birmingham was a steel town.
Yeah.
An iron and steel town, as many people know.
Named after Birmingham, England, which was also a steel town.
Exactly. So yeah, I went to a great little presentation when we talked about some of the specific songs that mention Alabama and mention the furnaces. Talked about some of the cultures and music that came out of there, and this is really fascinating stuff. Really fascinating.
You were saying earlier she didn't get too hardcore into theory. She was just kind of explaining music on a base level to most of the people that are there today.
Right? Yeah. It was easily digestible. Not much unlike many music theory conferences where if you're not up on your music theory, that might be a little bit of a squinter for you. But.
Sloss Furnace is a really cool part of the Birmingham skyline. If you get it, Google it and check it out. Sloss Furnace, SLOSS. Really cool, man. Just old, big, giant machines and conveyor belts and all kinds of cool stuff.
It's pretty awesome. And now, of course, it's been shut down for years and decades. And now, there's music concerts that go on there and stuff. So it's pretty awesome.
And of course, due to all the horrible deaths that occurred on the grounds,
it is haunted.
It's
what I'm told.
Yeah, if you believe in that, that is the place to check out because the TV shows have come here many times. My brother worked on Ghost Hunters. They came to Sloss and hung out. And good times, man.
Oh yeah, good times.
But anyway, I guess it's that time of the day that I love so much, where we talk about all of our friends and musicians out there.
Oh yes, and we get so much listener mail now. It is great. I remember when we first started and we got 0 for like the first 2 months, and then we got 1. And
oh yeah,
now they're coming fast and furious. So
Jesse Brink.
Yeah,
Jesse Brink.
I remember. Yeah, he had some great theory questions. I hope we answered them satisfactorily.
Right on. And here's another thing: when we say that we have a new review, a new Patreon patron, a new listener mail. Well, you might have actually written this to me, or you might have actually donated a month or two ago. But I'm trying to get everybody. I got a queue, and I'm trying to get everybody that I can thank for these things.
Just have a little patience. We have not forgotten nor taken you for granted.
Your story will be told.
Indeed.
Okay, and speaking of stories, well, I guess this is a review, so let's just
okay. Well,
see
speaking of reviews,
go ahead and take this one, Matt.
Okay. So, new review from Merry Music 9 from UK. Says, Music Theory Explained. It says, 5 stars to Matthew and Jeremy for a great podcast. Oh, thank you so much. Mm-hmm. Really helpful. I am a musicianship and piano teacher who was at university 30 years ago, so to be able to listen to Music Theory Explained refreshes and reminds me about things I had completely forgotten. Really useful for my job so that I can help the children I teach understand why I'm teaching them chords, etc. Also interesting for me as a player. Understanding music theory helps all aspects of playing and listening to music.
Uh-huh.
Indeed, yeah, totally agree. Love the approach of Matthew and Jeremy. I like their humility and reassurance that you don't have to know everything and get it right the first time, and that actually it's not that easy. And yes, if I had to get it right the first time, I most certainly would not be sitting here. That gives me confidence, especially when I beat Jeremy at the melodic harmonic dictation exercise. Oh man. Oh, calling you out, man. Listen to that. Love the banter between you. If I lived closer, I'd buy you a coffee. Well, and we would humbly accept.
Yeah.
Have listened to 97% of the podcast through building myself up to listen to Counterpoint 3. Thanks, guys. Lucy from North London-ish, England.
Lucy
from North London-ish.
That's
awesome.
I challenge you to a rematch.
That's good. Jeremy's gotten a lot better, by the way, fine listeners. His ear training, he was always good, but he's gotten better the more I make him do it, and I take a great amount of sadistic pleasure in torturing Jeremy with the ear training exercises. We're going to have to get back to that.
Yeah.
Get back to that soon.
Oh, isn't that convenient that I'm the producer and I put all these together?
I wonder why we haven't done any theory training exexercises in a while.
How about that? Well, I guess it's time to get back on that, isn't it?
I guess, yeah. Yeah, we actually haven't done it in a while, so we should probably look re-examine some of those. Yeah.
Well, we'll be listening today, but it won't be a harmonic progression episode per se.
No.
Now, other great news, we have a new Patreon patron, and actually, this ties into our last episode when we read a review by a gentleman named Chris out of Australia, South Australia. Well, it turns out, Chris, this is Chris Waite.
Ah.
And not long after he reviewed us, he gave us a Patreon donation. So
excellent.
Monthly, money donation to help support our cause.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Chris Waite, who grew up in Adelaide, South Australia.
Wow.
Learned piano in secondary and primary school and then got into medicine and was a general practitioner for 20 years.
Oh, very nice.
Fast forward, he is now in Beachport on the South Australian coast, and he's teaching, studying, living, and loving music.
Oh, that's great.
This month, he will have his final exam for his bachelor's in theory and composition.
All right, woohoo!
Yeah, so hopefully we'll have another congratulations pretty soon here.
Yeah.
This month. And he says we've been very helpful in that effort. So, maybe we'll be able to cheer him on.
Let's hope so. Well, very best of luck on your final exams. No one knows how stressful those are more than me.
Yeah.
I can't wait. That's so great. It's so great to hear that we're helpful to people at all levels. Even people studying music in college. We're still we can still help out, and that's just great. That's why we do this. And thank you so much for your donation.
You the man, Chris Waite. And that was a Patreon donation. Now, also you can do PayPal donations. We have a PayPal button on our website. And we have another person who actually helped us out there. Ezekiel Baldasso from Houston, Texas, gave us a nice donation. And he said he heard about us on the Musicality podcast. Our friends from the Musicality podcast. So very cool. Ezekiel Baldasso, that's one of the coolest names I think we've had so far.
It's a pretty cool name.
For listener mail.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool name.
Ezekiel.
Yeah.
Not far trailing behind is Charlene Van Ravenstein.
Yeah.
That was a pretty cool name.
Yeah, she needs to be on an episode of Game of Thrones or something.
Richard McLean, because it reminds me of John McClane from Die Hard.
Right.
And Jesse Brinkman, because it reminds me of Jesse
Pinkman.
Jesse Brink, because it reminds me of Jesse Pinkman.
From Breaking Bad
Great
fame.
names, yeah.
We watch too much Netflix is
Apparently.
the takeaway from here, from this conversation.
Apparently. Movie pop culture has not eluded us
Oh, no.
at Music Student 101.
Oh, no.
Okay, thanks again for that, Ezekiel.
Thank you so much.
Ezekiel says, call me Z, but I think I like Ezekiel better.
That may be Ezekiel.
Oh, no, he actually made phonetical spelling.
Oh,
for
he
me.
made it. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Yeah. And speaking of PayPal donors.
Yes, speaking of PayPal donors, we have another listener mail who is also a PayPal donor, a gentleman named Peter McAndrew from Orkney, a group of islands in the north of Scotland. He lives in the parish of Ham.
Ah.
And he says there's very strong musical culture and heritage here, particularly for the traditional Orcadian music, as well as contemporary folk music. I wonder what that would sound like, Orcadian, Northern Scotland Isles.
Oh, I'm going to have to check it out now because I am curious.
Well, he's recommended a couple of bands, one being The Chair,
Okay.
one being Nos, Gnoss, and one being Fara, Fara. And these are some really good local bands up there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's fascinating. I love learning about new folk traditions from around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, if anyone from these bands is listening, send us your stuff so we can listen and play it.
Absolutely.
Listen to it and play it.
And we will do that. We will do both of those things.
Man.
Peter writes, I started playing guitar when I was about 14 and listening to heavy metal, thrash, and just starting to get into punk/hardcore. My first 3 gigs were Megadeth, Slayer, and Metallica, all in 1988, as well as the Ramones.
Rock on.
I was into a lot of those bands too, Slayer, Metallica. That was my adolescence.
I took the Ramones to the punk rock avenue myself.
I played guitar in a Ramones cover band and in various other bands around my hometown until moving to Edinburgh, where I did a swap with my dad. He got my guitar, and I got his 5-string banjo. Oh, wow. So this is starting a whole new path here, going from guitar to banjo. Mm-hmm. That started a love affair with the banjo that's been going on about 20 years now. I've mostly been a bedroom picker, and I decided last year to really try and focus on getting out and playing with other folk. There's a great place here called The Reel. That's a bar/cafe/music shop/lessons and venue. I went to a couple of workshops at their winter school, met someone who invited me to a local monthly session, and through that met lots of other lovely musicians. That's great. It's always great to come together.
And I wonder if the reel is like the fishing reel,
Yeah.
or if he's actually talking about the Scottish-Irish traditional
Scottish-Irish
music.
folk dance thing.
Folk dance, yeah.
Real, yeah. Yeah, maybe clarify that at some point,
R-E-E-L.
Peter. Yeah. Interesting. Is and we've both done things like this too, where we just meet up with other musicians for the sake of creating music, and this is one of the real joys of being a musician.
Mm-hmm.
Is when you can just get together and form a sense of community around music making.
It brings people together.
It really, really does. That's something that's not, in my personal opinion, that's something that's not always emphasized a lot in our American music society, where we have this idea that the musicians are people on stage who are better at that than you, and that's why they're on stage, and you're just sitting there admiring them, right? But really, in most places around the world, music is a communal thing.
Yeah. And if the reel is like a typical pub out there, then they have probably regular sessions where musicians, they just come in and
play.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really more like what music is around the world. Mm-hmm. Really, most of the music in the world is that.
Yeah.
And so, it's just always great. Don't be afraid to take that first step out into meeting new musicians.
Good on you, Peter.
Yeah, good on you. My big breakthrough was getting a couple of music theory lessons with a guitarist to explain the diatonic scale, modes, how scale degrees relate to chord types, and it was like a light bulb going on. Yeah, those are very important key fundamental principles there. It's very enlightening to go from not understanding those to understanding those. I've been soaking up everything music ever since. As a result of that, I started listening to the Learn Jazz Standards podcast and I'm pretty sure it was through that I found you guys. Excellent.
Yeah, right on.
I even ordered a copy of Tonal Harmony recently.
How about that?
Oh, my
up these
sincere
textbooks.
condolences.
Mr. Francoli, Mr. Payne.
Yeah, we'll take our royalties whenever
Yes.
you get a chance. My friend gave me his mandolin out of the blue at Christmas, and I'm loving it. Turns out it's a much better instrument for the local music than the 5-string banjo. I'm going to sessions, starting to read music, and even played in the Orkney Folk Festival with the Orkney Mandolin Band. So much stuff we're going to have to check out.
I know.
I mean, we're going to have to get to work on some of this.
This might be an episode.
Yeah, this might be an episode of just let's send us recordings of your band and we'll play them. I have just been working through your shows, learning as much as I can. They really are a massive part of my learning, so thank you so much. Well, thank you, Peter. It's great to hear how far you've come and how much you're enjoying it. It's very satisfying for us to know that we're helping people grow as musicians. That's why we do this.
Now, that was the fun part. And before we get into the funner part, the music theory part, I kind of want to tug on your heartstrings for a little bit. We have a local musician here in Birmingham named Michael Moore, and he plays in a vintage country band called Rose-Colored Glasses, and a Grateful Dead cover band named the Alabama Getaway with a friend of mine, Paige.
Right.
He apparently had a situation. He's a guitarist, right-handed guitarist, so he frets with his left hand.
Mm-hmm.
He's also a woodworker. You know, he makes furniture and even does the occasional luthier work from time to time. Well, not long ago, he was working on one of his machines.
Mm-hmm.
So he got his hand caught in the machine.
Oh, God.
And on his left hand, he lost his pinky and his ring finger in their entirety, and then a good bit of his middle and index finger.
Oh, jeez.
On his left hand. So he kind of put up a post about it saying, you know, I'm not trying to get, this isn't my sob story, but I'm got to say, I'm probably never play guitar again.
Yeah.
You know? And then shortly after, just a few days later, his cousin, Kenny Barnes, shows up at the doorstep.
Okay.
He has a left-handed Epiphone Les Paul guitar.
Oh, nice.
His two cousins and his aunt went in together and got him a left-handed guitar.
Wow.
And his cousin also bought one for himself so they can have a competition. So you can learn left-hand guitar first.
Oh, that's great.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, wow, that's great.
There's hope and there's inspiration in that, and I think that I'd like to hear more of that kind of thing. You know, just a few episodes ago, we had a listener, Tom Coe, who wrote in saying that he had a neurological condition that came from a surgery he had that made it to where he couldn't drive race cars anymore.
Yeah.
And he was able to use music to get out of that funk. And we'd like to hear some more stories if you guys have any where music has helped you or where you've been inspired or has helped you get through a tough time. Or maybe your music has been challenged. You know, times when I'm playing bass, sometimes my hand gets a little stiff and I'm like, okay, is this the beginning?
of the dreaded tendonitis, which is the scourge of all musicians.
Yeah. Hats off to you, Michael Moore, for weathering the storm. And I also want to give a shout out to his cousins, Kenny Barnes and Jennifer Yates, and his aunt, Pat Webb, who actually made that happen, that wonderful act of kindness, and his wife, Emily, for keeping us all posted. We wish you all the luck and success in your new direction.
Yeah, best of luck. Keep at it.
Yeah, man. Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys. But that's still just amazing. I mean, talk about love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, secondary leading tone chords.
Yeah, so back to theory.
Back to theory. You said something funny earlier.
I did?
You did.
That doesn't sound like me.
You said it was the way you said it, I think, actually.
Okay.
The expression with which you said it. You said that the 7-chord blew up tonality.
The fully diminished.
Fully diminished.
The fully diminished 7-chord blew up tonality. So we are, in terms of classical music, we are progressing along for a few hundred years with this idea of what we call tonal harmony, which in one sense means that music has a tonal center. In another sense, it means that music is progressing towards that tonal center. And in another sort of general sense, it means that in progressing to that tonal center, is following all the rules and stuff that we've been talking about in this podcast all the time. All the sort of music theory, the way things go together and stuff. Those things are evolving through that whole time, but it's still progressing to that tonal center. The fully diminished 7 chord, because it was a chord that technically doesn't have a root. All the notes in this particular chord happen to be a minor third apart. Oops. And because of that, any one of them might be considered a root.
Yeah.
So because of that, it could do lots of things, and it could resolve anywhere. And then you got into this thing. Well, a fully diminished 7 chord that resolves to a 4 chord, or have you modulated a 4 or not? It's like, well, who cares really? And in many, because harmony was really counterpoint, they could use this chord to create chromatic lines, and you would just create a diminished 7 chord, and then that chord didn't really have to function. It didn't have to resolve anywhere. The idea was that you were moving up chromatic lines in the bass or something like that, and because of that, you didn't need to really think of that chord as resolving anywhere. It was just the notes that went with that chord at that time.
Right.
So because of this chord kind of blows up tonality.
Yeah.
Tonality kind of falls apart. It gets to the point to where we don't really know where our tonal center is for a lot of the time. We don't really know if we're progressing to the tonal center in the way we have. And we go through that period, and then in the 20th century, people start saying, well, does it even matter? And some people are happy with just to ignore the idea. Other people are saying, well, then let's just construct music around some kind of other principle, because this is kind of petered out as an idea.
Yeah, if this doesn't matter, what does matter?
Right, if this doesn't matter, what does matter? Exactly, yeah. So they're fascinating little chords.
We should probably say that if you have not listened, if you're just hearing this episode for the first time, if you're hearing this podcast for the first time, and you're starting on
maybe not start here.
I have some notes here, actually. Let's see here. I recommend you listen to episode, well, obviously, it's done in sequence, right, for the most part. Most of our theory topics are done in sequence.
Really go back and listen to episode 1 and
all the way up.
But if you don't have time for that,
pay special attention though to episode 45, because that's when we talk about secondary dominance. So a 5 of 1, a 5 of 7, a 5 of a chord that is acting as a 5 of another chord.
Right, that is acting as a dominant functioning chord resolving to something other than 1. Yes. Whereas 5 resolves to 1, 5 of 2 resolves to 2, 5 of 5 resolves to 5, etc.
Right, and it'll be comprised of some chords that are not in the scale. Some chromaticism.
Yeah, brief introduction to chromaticism in that episode.
In that episode, we covered, I think, maybe the 5 of 5 of 5, the 5 of 4, maybe a few of them, and then part 2 we covered the rest of them. That was episode 49.
Okay,
which we did that one, and then episode 52 we did 7 chords.
Right, yeah. So check out those in particular if you feel if you feel kind of not ready for secondary 7 chords. Mm-hmm. If you have listened to those, then secondary leading tone chords, secondary 7th chords, are secondary 7 chords.
Yeah, that's right. That gets me every time.
It can get me too.
Yeah.
Secondary 7 chords are a pretty easy sort of expansion of that concept. It's a pretty small step to go to secondary 7 chords. So, in the same way that diatonically speaking, a 5 will resolve to 1. We also know that a 7 chord also resolves to 1. Beautifully. And there's really only one note's different between those two, right? The 5/7 chord has a scale degree 5 in it. Otherwise, it would be a leading tone chord.
These are just triads you were playing, right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. By that same principle, the same way a secondary dominant 5 of 2 can resolve to 2, can be briefly the dominant of 2 by bringing in some notes outside the scale. We can create 7 chords, leading tone chords, of a certain note of a certain chord that then resolves to that diatonic chord. And again, we do it through chromaticism, bringing in notes from outside of the scale. And we're even going to bring in a couple of more this time, a couple of other notes from outside the scale. So we're stepping into the realm of chromaticism, of bringing in notes outside of our key and outside of the major scale that we're in. We waded good ankle deep in it now. So,
hey, while we're at it, can we establish a key and go ahead and point out the leading tone so we can hear that tendency?
Absolutely. So I'm going to be in C major. Or should I be in G major? I feel like I'm in...
Well, let's do C because the intro music was actually in C.
Okay.
And we're going to relate to that a little bit
All
anyways.
Right. So just like our intro music, I'm going to be in good old C major. And just a little PSA, as is always the case, any of these concepts are applicable in any key.
Of course.
Right? That's the way keys work. So what holds true for C major is going to hold true for all major keys.
For me, C major was the path of least resistance and complication when I was already trying to tackle some chromaticism. And,
oh yeah, that's not just you. That's it is for absolutely everybody.
Gotta leave the comfort zone at some point, but no one says when you have to.
Yeah, when you read theory textbooks, most of them actually do a pretty good job of randomizing their keys, so forcing you to think.
And we do sometimes, but I think I always C major when I can get it.
So I'm in good old C major. And so I am just going to do something here, and there's a really common bass line where we go scale degree 1, up to scale degree 4, up to scale degree sharp 4, right? And 5. And in one of those previous episodes, I'm sure we harmonized that sharp 4 with a 5 of 5. This time I'm going to try doing it with a 7 of 5. A 7 half diminished of 5.
Ooh, half diminished, eh?
Let's see if we can do that. So 1, 4, 7 half diminished of 5 to 5. And then 1.
Right on.
Hear all that dissonance in that chord? Hear how crunchy that chord is?
And once I hit 5, I was like, wait, yeah, I feel it 1-ish. But then you hit that 1, I was like, oh, no.
Oh, no, that's
1.
Yeah, you can... this is kind of why it blew up tonality a little bit, right?
It did in my mind.
I'll do that one more.
Lucy from Northern England, did you catch that?
All right. Where was I? Oh, yeah. I'm going to do that one more time.
I'm not mad. I really love you, Lucy. I'm not jealous.
That's good. I want to bring Lucy down here now because I'm going and give you guys like an ear training test. So I can see who I'll grade both of you, see who does better.
Whoever wins, whoever loses brings coffee next time.
Whoever loses bring coffee. Yeah, there you go. Loser has to buy coffee.
Okay, so we got the
although Lucy is from London, she may prefer tea.
Possibly.
So if you lose, you may have to buy tea.
Only the finest
right.
for Lucy.
So one more time. 1, 4, 7 half diminished 7 of 5, 5, 1. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. It's like there's a creeping tension. It's just like, yeah, it's hard to describe. But you can hear the chromatic steps up.
Yeah.
Pretty well. You can hear the chromatic movement.
Yeah, and when you start listening to 19th century classical music, Schubert and Schumann and Chopin and all those guys, these kinds of chords are very, very prevalent. You can find them all the way back as far as Bach, really. They give your music a richness in its harmony that you're just not going to get playing diatonically all the time.
Right.
Color, yeah. Exactly. From the chromaticism. The word chroma meaning color.
Right.
And these chords are available to us in all the inversions and things like this. You will occasionally see these chords as a triad, so just 7 diminished of 5 or what have you. But really, at least in the classical music repertoire, they're much more often full 7 chords. So either 7 half diminished 7 or 7 fully diminished 7.
So 7 7 seventh chords.
Yeah, 7 seventh chords.
Yeah.
7 chords. So I mean, I can do this. Let's see if I can do a different inversion this time. I'm going to do 1, and just to mess it up, I'm going to do 2/6, and then I'm going to do 7 6 5, and then 5, and then 1. That inversion kind of weakened that pull. When that pull was up to the 5 wasn't in the bass, it kind of weakened that sense of tonality being on 5, didn't it?
I see. Yeah.
Let me try that again.
1.
Because 1 2 6 6 7 6 5 of 5. And then 5. And then 1.
So, if I was to zoom out
Mm-hmm.
and take a look at this, I might just say that this was a 1 2 5 1 progression
Yes.
with a 7 kind of as an elaboration or something kind of
Yeah.
helping that movement.
Yeah. With the 7 is a sort of surface level element moving to the 5.
Can we hear 1 2 5 1 and then 1 2 7 5 5 1 back to back?
Yeah. So let's just hear 1 2 5 1.
Uh-huh.
So 1 and 2 6 is always easier voice leading wise, right? Avoiding the parallel fifths and stuff.
First inversions,
Yeah.
2 chord, yeah.
Yeah. So 1 first inversion, so 2 6, and then 5, which is that was actually 5 7. Sorry,
That's all right.
and then 1.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simple stuff. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so we're going to do that same thing. We're going to go 1 2 6 7 6 5 of 5 to 5, and then 1. And I kind of my soprano voice is different in those because different voice leading stuff comes in to keep you kind of end up on the scale degree 5 in that last example. Because, at least I did.
Counterpoint happens.
Counterpoint happens. is definitely who was it? Was it Peter that was gearing up for counterpoint 3?
I think so.
Or one of our recent listeners trying to get up the nerve for counterpoint 3? No, that was
that was
Merry
Lucy.
Music 9.
That was Lucy, yeah.
Yeah, Lucy. So Lucy's trying to get work up the nerve to listen to counterpoint 3. We empathize.
Yeah.
But it happens.
Mhm.
It happens. So you can play these and resolve up to any diatonic chord. For example, well, let's see what I can do here. So let me just do this time. I'll do 1 7 7 of 2 to 2 to 5 to 1. And so now it you can see where it's kind of pretty easy to put those 2 chord progressions together, right? So and do like 1 7 7 of 2 to 2 to 7 7 of 5. Let's see if I can pull that off. And then 5. Yeah, I kind of pulled that off. And 1. Right?
Yeah.
And now we've got lots of chromaticism. If I just play that bass line, I went.
Yeah. Very interesting. I don't write a lot of bass lines like that.
Well, you could start.
Well, I did this episode actually. So let's talk about kind of the difference between the half diminished and fully diminished, if we can.
All right. Well, the half diminished 7 chord is a diminished 7 chord with a minor 7th on top, as you'll remember if you listened to that episode of where we talked about 7 chords.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I were to make, as I just did, a C sharp half diminished 7, and, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have this minor 7,
Mm-hmm.
and in between I have this diminished chord.
Yeah.
Right? And this is a fairly typical chord, the half diminished 7. It is diatonic, I believe. Yes, it is diatonic in the major scale on scale degree 7.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to play a chord with its root scale degree 7 in the major key, diatonically it would be a 7 half diminished 7.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, which means it is also diatonic in the minor key on 2, right? So D, F, A, D. Yeah. So, well, a natural minor anyway. So in the natural minor scale, it would also be diatonic on 2.
Right.
Yeah. So that is pretty common. It tends to resolve a half step up from what its root is, and as always, voice leading considerations are important. So the 7 of that chord will tend to resolve down.
Uh-huh.
As the root of that chord will tend to resolve up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the 7th
The 7th
resolves down
resolves down
to the 3rd of the tonic, or the
Right,
3rd
right.
of chord being tonicized.
Yeah, the root of the 7 chord
The root of the 7 chord resolves up,
resolves upward.
ideally to the tonic of whatever it's tonicizing, or
Right, yeah.
the root of whatever chord it's tonicizing.
Right, yeah. And when we talked about secondary dominance, there was the idea of the secondary deceptive cadence, where it could go to the 6 of and things like that. With 7th chords, with half diminished 7 chords, most of the time I say, Jeremy can see me wincing when I say, "Oh
He's
crap, I'm
wincing.
about to, I'm about to make one of those statements." But most of the time, it's going to go ahead and just resolve to that root. That's the half diminished 7 chord.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the fully diminished 7 chord presents us some. You could call them challenges or problems. I like to think of them as opportunities or options.
There you go.
It produces us, because if I play a fully diminished 7 chord, that is a diminished chord on top of which there is a diminished 7. So if I were to do that with a C chord, I would play C, E flat, G flat, right, which is my diminished chord, and then I would play B double flat, aka A natural.
Enter the double flat.
Yeah, right. Into the great double flats. A diminished 7 being a half step lower than a minor 7.
Right. Okay.
So a half step, a major 7 is just a half step below the octave, if you recall, and then a minor 7 is a whole step below that octave. And now the diminished 7 is a whole step plus a half step, a minor third below. So yeah, we're in B double flat territory, aka A natural.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about this chord is that it is made up entirely of the interval of a minor third. So I have a minor third from C to E flat. I have a minor third from E flat to G flat. And I have a minor third from G flat to B double flat. Or A, if you prefer.
Yeah.
So it is a chord of all of minor thirds. And then, of course, I have a minor third from A back up to the octave at C. Right? So these are all minor thirds. This is what we call a symmetrical set. So it has taken our chromatic scale of all 12 notes and divided it evenly 3 half steps in each section. Right?
4 notes each.
Yeah, right. 4 notes, each note's 3 half steps apart.
Yep.
to get us all the way around 12 notes. So, if you think of the chromatic scale as like a clock face, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like on the clock, a diminished chord on C major would be at 1, 3, 6, and 9.
Nice.
Yeah, nice, right? So, because of this symmetry, there isn't really a root per se. When we're talking about major and minor chords, we distinguish the root as being the note that's kind of at the bottom of the perfect fifth. Major and minor chords all have a perfect fifth in them. So whatever note is at the bottom of that, or at the top of the perfect fourth if you've inverted it. So that because there's a fifth there and then just thirds in other places, then we have that ability to say, okay, well, that unequalness says, well, this is the root of the note. We don't have that with a fully diminished 7 chord because it's all minor thirds.
Right. It's harder to deduct.
Yeah.
Use that deduction analysis to find out what exactly chord it is.
Yeah. So if I play a C fully diminished 7 chord and ask you to what note does that resolve? To what chord would that resolve?
Because you said it was a C fully diminished, my default answer would be that it's about to resolve to a C sharp chord.
Yeah, so
however,
C sharp minor that time.
C sharp minor.
Just because I'm crazy like that.
You are crazy. However, if you play that chord again, it could also resolve to. Let's see here. Yeah. What was that?
That was E major.
Okay.
Yeah, because you think of these notes as C, and then C, E flat, G flat, B double flat, and therefore they're a C flat chord. But if you start on E flat, G flat, B double flat, C, it's also an E flat fully diminished 7 chord, right? That's because of that symmetry.
Right.
Yeah. We've got the same notes going here.
Yeah.
So for that reason, it could also resolve upwards to E. Same token, if you did G flat, B double flat, D double flat, aka C, right? E flat. We have a G flat fully diminished 7 chord. So this note could resolve to G.
All beautiful.
Pretty wicked, huh?
All beautiful, almost perfect resolutions.
Yeah, entirely perfect. Just the sound, people are going to think I'm just resolving into the same chord every time, but this is is resolving to E major, and this is resolving to G. And then, and then finally, this B double flat, if we wanted to go ahead and call that A, we would have, I'll drop it down an octave, we would have A, C, E flat, and G flat. Totally an A fully diminished 7 chord, right?
Yeah.
So we can also go to B flat. Wow. Yeah.
Okay, so let's try and drive this home just a little bit more.
Okay.
With a little bit of Roman numeral analysis.
Okay.
So take us back to C. Take us
back to C.
Good old C major.
Good old C major. Hold on.
Gotta get that pedal. That pedal keeps on running away from Matt.
The pedal. Okay. All right. Good old C major. Nice and diatonic.
Okay. So first off, spell out a fully diminished 7 of 2 chord.
A fully diminished 7 of 2 chord.
Fully diminished 7 of 2 chord.
Right. Well, you could actually probably just say fully diminished 7. Fully diminished implies that there's a 7th there, right?
Okay. So if we want to spell out a 7 of 2 chord in the key of C major in root position, we'll start with that leading tone, which would be C sharp, and then E, up and down the minor third to G, and then B flat. Now, spell out a 7 of 4.
7 of 4. All right. So that is going to be an E chord. E,
E, and then G, B flat.
Ah, I see what you're doing here. And D flat, aka C sharp. So we're playing the same notes here.
The same 4 notes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just like you said. Now, let's talk about the relationship and why this is all of a sudden kind of clicking together. So, the 7 of 2 is the same chord. The fully diminished 7 of 2 is the same chord as the fully diminished 7 of 4.
Yes.
What is the relation between 2 and 4?
It's a minor third.
A minor third. Now,
And so all you've done is move the note. You've got the same 4 notes that are all a minor third apart.
Mm-hmm.
You're just moving the note you're calling the root, right? So this is an analytical observation. You know, it's nothing's really changed about those 4 notes musically, right? You're just moving what you're calling the note, and every time you move up a minor third, you know, the 7 of 6 is going to be the same situation, right? Because we're moving up a minor third again.
Is it? Are you sure?
Oh no, that's a major third. Okay, scratch that.
Major third. But it would be the 7 of...
So 7 of 2, 7 of 4, 7 of flat 6, and then 7 of 7.
Okay, so there's a flat 6 in there. That's the missing. Okay.
Yeah.
So so either way, we got a minor third patterns between using the exact same chord.
Yeah, absolutely. So takeaway from all of this is that a fully diminished 7 chord can be resolving up to any note that is a half step above one of its chord tones.
Ah, that's a nice and easy way to put it.
Yes. So all 4 of those chord tones in any fully diminished 7 chord, your options for resolving that fully diminished 7 chord is any chord whose root is a half step above any of those 4 notes. So, you know, when you start to analyze fully diminished 7 chords, and you say, well, is it a 7 of 2, or is it a 7 of 4, or is it 7 of 7? Yes, that is a thing. And then, of course, 7 of 7 resolves to 7, which resolves to 1, right? And you get this nice chromatic up to 1.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. Totally a thing.
You can resolve to a diminished chord?
Kind of blew up tonality, remember?
Right.
The answer is yes.
With quotes.
With giant air quotes.
He's putting quotes up in the air.
Yes. Where was I? Yeah. Whether you call it 7 of 2, 7 of 4, you know, fully diminished 7, 6, 5 of 5 or whatever, it all depends on what chord is coming next, right? You see a fully diminished 7 chord, and if that chord is followed by a 2 chord that is a half step up from one of its chord tones, then it's a 7 fully diminished 7 of 2.
Right.
If you see the same chord and it's followed by flat 6, then it is a 7 fully diminished 7 of flat 6, which in the minor key would just be 7 of 6, right?
So,
and this is only fully diminished. Now, you know, half diminished, they're not symmetrical like that, so they have sort of legit roots
and legit resolutions, or lesser options. For resolution.
You know, that root being defined as the note that's on the top of the major second that happens between the minor 7th and the octave.
So it seems like kind of rare that you end up analyzing after the fact. Judge ye not by the chord you see, judge ye by the chord that follows.
I like that.
Right?
I like that. Yeah, and that can be a little... It is at this point when you're analyzing theory that you hopefully start getting a sense of the difference, the distinction between slapping a label on something and explaining what's going on. You know, in beginning theory, those two things are one and the same. You know, this is a 5 chord because it has the properties of a 5 chord, and moves the way a 5 chord would. So slapping a label on something is the same thing as saying what's going on. As you get more advanced, you start to see this distinction between slapping a label on something and describing what's going on. So rather than saying, well, this is a 7 fully diminished 4/3 of 2 moving to 4, you know, say, well, no, this is a 7 fully diminished 4/3 of 4 moving to 4, because that's what's happening. A fully diminished 7 chord that's decided to resolve a half step up to one of those notes.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Now, let me ask you about voice leading considerations.
Voice leading considerations. All right.
Because we've talked a lot about that in the past, and fortunately, we've kind of already covered that a good bit.
Yeah, well, the TLDR for all voice leading considerations is, those same basic rules. Don't do parallel fifths. Don't do parallel octaves.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do direct fifths or octaves. Try not to double the third. Don't double the seventh.
Yeah. Because if you double the seventh, the seventh is going to want to resolve down to the third of the chord. So if you double that and actually follow the rules, you'll find yourself in a parallel octave situation.
You'll find yourself in a parallel octave situation, yeah. Which you may have noticed as I've been playing examples. My inversions and voicings have shifted to be able to effectively avoid some of the absolute worst.
Wow.
I'm not going to claim perfection here, but to avoid some of the absolute worst parallelisms and stuff.
Well, to even do it on the fly is pretty impressive in my book.
Oh, well, thanks. I do what I can. No one ever accused me of being a pianist.
Nope.
But I can think through theory pretty good.
Well, another thing about the doubling is that the leading tone of the scale. So if you're doing a 7 of 1, just a 7 chord.
Yeah.
Then you don't want to double that 7 either.
Because you create parallel octaves almost by... your two rules conflate with each other because the 7 has to resolve up, and yet resolving both those 7ths up will create parallel octaves.
Now, you had kind of a cool little nugget of how to get out of this situation. And that was just play the full 7 chord.
Just kind of play the full 7 chord. If you have to double something, double the root or the 5th. If you're playing a triad, you're going to have to double one of those. But if you're playing a half diminished or fully diminished 7 chord, unless you just really can't do it for some reason, just play the whole chord. Just play the whole chord.
Or in the event that sonically it just doesn't do what you wanted it to do, then just do whatever you.
Then just do whatever. Yeah, but
do.
I'm not going to say there's never a situation where voice leading concerns won't lead you into having to double one of those notes. But try to stay away from those. Try to, because first of all, what you want out of these chords is that rich, colorful sort of dissonance, right? And second of all, it can be, it can just avoid some bad situations if you try to double the third and you end up in parallel octaves, or if you try to double the 7th and you wind up with a bad situation. Other things that it's a good time to remind us of: yes, 7ths generally the root of this chord will generally want to resolve up. It's generally considered sort of a leading tone, right? And it'll want to resolve up. The 7th will generally want to resolve down. It's considered a 7th, just like in the 5/7, and it's going to want to pull down, usually a half step down into the diatonic chord. So with these chords inherently have tritones in them, so you can hear the
tension.
Yeah, and while it is certainly possible, and you'll find occasions where this is the best thing to do to sort of resolve those two notes in the same directions, because they're tritones, that's not parallel fifths, right? The tritone is not a perfect fifth. So.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So parallel fifths is strictly referring to perfect fifths.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Tritones not so much. It can be a little awkward, but you can get away with it. But in general, we tend to like to hear tritones resolving out. For example. Or if I were to move to E major, one of our other options in this chord.
Nice.
Yeah. Is this also? This is also a tritone. There's two tritones. Yeah, and this is the one I resolved down to a perfect fourth.
So within the fully diminished 7th chord, there's 2 tritones.
Yes, there is 2 tritones.
But not so much the half diminished 7th chord.
Yeah, there are 2 tritones in the fully diminished 7. In the half diminished 7, there's a tritone and a perfect fifth.
It's a little bit sweeter. Just a little bit sweeter than that fully diminished.
Just a little bit sweeter, yeah. That's probably also your ear sort of adjusting to. It all sounded dissonant at the beginning of this podcast. I imagine.
Yeah.
After a while, your ears do adjust to these kind of things.
The more time you spend in that crazy little world, chaotic world,
Yeah.
the more it starts to make sense.
Yeah, and like I said, it gives your harmony a really rich sense of color and really rich sense of depth to it when you're not just playing diatonic chords all the time. Throw in a couple of 7 of 7s or a couple of 7 of 5s or 5 of 5s, secondary dominants and things. In future podcasts, we will talk about other chromaticisms, even more in-depth chromaticisms. You see now how much chromaticism we're working with when we were supposed to be in the key of C major, and we were talking about E flat, G flat, and B double flat, and all of this stuff. So
just look out.
Oh yeah, it's gonna get good. Couple of things. So we already talked about all of our inversions are there for us.
Can we list those real quick? The inversions of the 7 chord?
Absolutely. I'll use a half diminished 7 chord because that takes away the whole symmetry, minor third, not really a root kind of thing.
Right.
So in root position, this is 7. 7 half diminished 7.
Okay.
Right? In first inversion, this is 7 half diminished 6/5.
Mm-hmm.
In second inversion,
with the 5th in the bass.
This is 7 half diminished 4/3.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, we can put the 7 in the bass. And this is 7 half diminished 4/2.
Okay.
And if you're wondering where we're getting these numbers from, we did an episode on figured bass, probably back towards the beginning.
Way back.
Yeah, where we talk about how these are the intervals created by these inversions, and therefore,
Past Matt and past Jeremy will tell you all about.
Yeah, we'll be happy to tell you about it. Yeah.
But just to recap, root position 7 chord.
Yes.
First inversion 6/5 chord.
Yep.
Second inversion 4/3.
4/3.
Third inversion 4/2.
4/2. I just sort of think of myself as sort of counting backwards. 6/5, 4/3, and then 4/2.
Mm-hmm.
So just had a little extra 4 in there.
Yep. Very good.
Yeah.
So the inversions typically make for more interesting bass lines and better voice leading. Is that correct?
In inversions, one of their primary things is to make interesting bass lines. At this point, they're also helpful in sort of avoiding parallelisms.
Mm-hmm.
Some chords that parallelisms are really hard to get away, hard to avoid in root position. You change the inversion and it has those two voices going in opposite directions, and so then you can do it. So yeah, interesting bass lines and in this level avoiding parallelisms and things. And interesting other lines too. We're getting into the place where these inversions can inspire us to create different, more interesting melodies and more interesting alto and tenor lines and things as well. So
very, very cool.
Yeah. So another little consideration, as long as we're talking about inversions, when we have a fully diminished 7/6/5, so we're talking about, right? It is this chord can go down to the root of the chord we're resolving to, or it can go up to the third of the chord we're resolving to, making a first inversion diatonic chord.
You're referring to which note now?
The bass note.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. Okay.
So you can get. And you can see how you can create great chromatic bass lines, great walking bass lines doing this kind of stuff.
Right.
Keep in mind that up to the third to make a first inversion diatonic chord option is not an option when you're talking about 7/6/5 of 5. Because the third of a 5 chord is going to be our major key's leading tone, and you don't want to double that note. Yeah.
Because it's bad counterpoint.
Because it's bad counterpoint.
Because they will both have to resolve.
Because then the very next chord, you're going to have parallel octaves and want to go, how do I not do this? This is crazy. I quit. Yeah. So.
And all you did was double the leading tone, so it was going to happen anyways.
It was going to happen anyways.
Follow the rules.
Follow the rules.
So don't if you have a choice, don't double anything.
If you have a choice, don't double anything.
right?
Yeah, make that a 5-6-5 chord, and you're fine.
Boom.
So there you go.
What else?
What
man?
else? Let us note also that a 7-4-2 chord has the 7th of the chord in the bass.
Yes.
So it is going to resolve down to the 5th of the next chord of the chord you're tonicizing. So you're creating a 6-4 chord there. So 7-4-2s are generally going to be seen in anticipation of some place where it's generally acceptable to use 6-4 chords. So either that 6-4 chord is itself going to pass to something else, a passing 6-4 chord, or it's going to create a cadential 6-4 motion. Are going to be your two big options.
Which we also talked about in past episodes.
Yeah, I feel really bad for anybody who's like, oh, this looks like a neat podcast, and they started on this one because
Well, if they made it this far, it's no doubt due to our charming wit and banter.
that's got to be it. Yeah.
Because all these 4, 5, 6, 6, 5, 4, 2, 5, 4. Oh, it gets heavy.
It's not because this has great entertainment value.
So let's move on a little bit to something that I just want to hear.
Okay.
It's Pedal Points.
A pedal point. So let's hear a 7 diminished 7-5 with a pedal note. Where did you even hear about this?
Well, this was in our good friend Roy Francolli's Harmony and Context book.
Okay.
This is what I call a TBC moment. Textbook clarification. Brought to you by Dr. Matt Phillips.
Okay, so we have 7. Well, we have 1, and then we have 5. And then we're going to create a 7 fully diminished 7. So, and that's going to mean a 5. And then we do what? And then have a 5 over it?
Yeah, I guess the scale degree 5 is going to hold through this progression.
Oh, okay. So we're going to have 5.
So scale degree 5 will be your pedal tone.
Yeah. So 1, and then we're going to have a scale degree 5, to which we are then going to add,
Whoa.
Yeah, whoa.
So the
That
pedal.
was pretty neat.
Yeah, let's hear that again, actually.
Okay.
And which note is that pedal note to listen for?
In the bass.
This guy right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
1, and then 5, and then we're going to put our pedal tone in the bass here.
Okay.
And then 7 fully diminished 7 of 5. Right. So I'm just changing in the right hand and not in the. This is what a pedal tone is, right? And we could even keep doing that kind of thing. Or maybe if I was up an octave, we could keep doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, it gets a little muddy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In the lower register.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's that kind of drone, that one note that drones out over these changes.
Yeah, creates an interesting kind of tension there.
Typically in the bass, wouldn't you say?
Typically, you can have pedal tones in other voices, but I think it's most famous for its use in the bass.
Because of the organ foot pedals, right?
Right. Yeah, that's why they called it a pedal tone. It's with the organ pedals that you hit with your feet.
Very good. Very good. And the other thing I have in my notes is that, and I think we kind of covered this a little bit, that it can be an elaboration of a 1-5-1 progression. Mm-hmm. Well, if you ask Schenker, everything's an elaboration of the 1-5-1. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
But as it relates to the 7 of chord, or the leading tone chord,
right?
So I kind of caught this earlier when you did a 1-2-5-1 progression, and then you did a 1-2-7 of 5. One, I think it was.
Yeah, that sounds accurate.
So the 7 really didn't need to be there, but since it was there, it was kind of acting as a vehicle to pass this chord on to the next chord.
Yeah.
A funny looking vehicle.
Yeah, is a way to create this passing tone in the bass. right? There's a way to create that passing tone in the bass, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to add chromatic. So in that way, it was an elaboration of 1-5-1. And if you're right, if you ask Schenker, everything is an elaboration of 1-5-1. That doing 1-2-6-5-1 was also an elaboration of, because that 2-6 is also pushing to 5, which is going to 1. And then 1-7-2 to 2-6 to 5-1 is elaboration of 1-5-1, right?
Yep.
Because the 7-2 is elaborating 2, which is then in its turn elaborating 5, which is in its turn moving to 1.
Oh wow.
So that this is how music works.
Yeah.
This you can go from those little chord progressions out into a Beethoven symphony. It's just spreading it out.
Spreading it out, elaborating, adding color, adding interest, adding intrigue, adding tension.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You know what? It sounds to me like life is just one big 5-1, 1-5-1 progression, doesn't it?
We're all just headed to that final perfect authentic cadence, man.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be some modulations on the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Some interesting moments. But hopefully not too much tension.
So get some fully diminished 7 chords in your life while you still can.
Yeah, make it more interesting. Okay, so to recap, we started off talking about how just like you can make a 5 of 5 of any chord and tonicize just about any chord by using the dominant 5 of that chord. You can do the same thing with the leading tone 7 chord.
You can indeed.
And you can use the triad, the diminished triad, the half diminished 7th chord, or the fully diminished 7th chord.
Right.
Now, that's all we have to say.
That was basically it in a nutshell, right?
No. We talked about how it's kind of good for using in like chromatic movements.
Yeah, it's its job, like all secondaries, is sort of to add a level of chromaticism. This is an even a slightly increased level of chromaticism from secondary dominance. We have more chromaticism going on here, a little bit more. It is a great way to add some color, some sort of dissonance. It's a little flavor to your chord progressions that you wouldn't get just from diatonic chords.
Right. I immediately could tell when we were no longer in Kansas anymore, so to speak.
Absolutely. So while you're doing this, recognize the fact that while a half diminished 7 chord is a chord that resolves in ways that are fairly conforming to the way other chords resolves, a fully diminished 7 chord is actually a chord made up of entirely of minor thirds. And that because of that, there is no one note that is necessarily the root. Any of those 4 notes could be the root of the chord.
And because of any of those 4 notes could be the root of a 7 of chord or leading tone 7 chord.
Absolutely. And because of that chord can resolve a half step up from any one of those tones.
Any one of those 4 tones, in the case of the 7th chord.
Yeah.
So you have 4 possible resolutions.
Exactly.
What a nice and easy modulation, get out of modulation free card.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. That's one of his big, big uses in the repertoire is to end up in a crazy key suddenly.
Yep. Oh, what happened? Very cool, man.
Yeah. So there's that.
We kind of spelled out we kind of talked about spelling out the chords a little bit. Do you want to just do that real quick, just to spell out a fully diminished chord versus half diminished and listen to them real quick?
Yeah, so like a C half diminished 7 chord is going to be C, E flat,
minor third,
G flat,
minor third.
Yeah, and then not a minor third because it's half diminished. Or minor 7.
There's a minor 7, yeah.
So
that's half diminished.
That is half diminished. Fully diminished is going to be C, E flat, G flat, minor third up, a minor third up, and then a minor third above that, and a diminished 7 above the root, what we're calling the root, B double flat, aka A. So it's even more crunchy, right?
And of course, a minor third up from A would be that C note. So
would be that C, right?
Back at the C again.
We'd be back at the octave.
You come full circle.
Back on it.
And you said that if it was a clock face and the C was 12, then it would be like 3, 6,
3, 6
9.
would be at 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. E flat, F, and A/B double flat.
Mm-hmm. 4 pieces of pizza.
Yeah.
A pizza cut into 4 pieces of pizza.
4 equal distant from each other.
4 equal
So it is
slices.
symmetrical. And it's that symmetry that lends it that ambiguity of what note is the root.
And then, like we said, the voice leading considerations are not far from the ones we've already learned. In fact, they're pretty much the same as the ones we've already learned.
Avoid parallel fifths, avoid parallel octaves, avoid all that stuff. You can avoid those things by being careful of your tendency tones. Mm-hmm. Remember that the root of a 7 chord is going to want to resolve a half step up.
Mm-hmm.
The seventh that you're creating is going to want to resolve a half step down.
Mm-hmm.
Remember those things. Be careful of doubling the third because it can lead to parallel octaves.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful of doubling the seventh for the same reason.
The leading tone?
Yeah. In general, just try to spell all 4 chords.
4 notes?
Yeah, right. In general, just try to spell all 4 notes.
Yeah, right.
That's really the best way to avoid. And the bass, the lowest note in a 7/6/5, fully diminished 6/5,
mm-hmm.
It can move down to the root of the next chord,
mm-hmm.
or it can move up to the third of the next chord, unless you're talking about 7/6/5 of 5, in which moving up to the third of the 6th chord is going to leave you with a doubled leading tone of your major key, and you don't want that.
Right.
A little technical difficulty. Basically, yeah, just follow the rules.
And that would avoid problems in moving forward also.
Yeah.
And speaking of moving forward, we talked about how it's kind of funny that we analyze some of these, the fully diminished 7th chord, we analyze not based on the chord you see,
right,
but kind of on the chord that comes after.
Kind of on the chord that follows it, yeah. The sort of the distinction between slapping a label on something and sort of describing what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
This particular fully diminished 7 chord is a fully diminished 7 of 4, not because of any intrinsic value it has, but because of the fact that the next chord is a 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it could have been a 2.
It could have been a 2.
It could have
been a flat 6.
Yep.
It could have been a 7.
Or a leading
These are
tone
fun.
7. Yeah. It gets crazy. And then we talked about inversions and how they're mainly used to make for more interesting bass lines.
More interesting bass lines. Also to avoid some counterpoint violations and parallelism violations and things. Those are the 2 main rules of any inversion, right? Cool bass lines and avoid parallelisms.
All right. Good enough.
That's kind of what brings inversions to the dance.
See, just this simple little sentence gave me another aha moment. Love it. Anything else to say about the inversions?
I think that's it.
We had a little fun with pedal points.
We had a little fun with pedal points.
Yeah, just having that one bass note that kind of stays around.
Yeah. Oh, I should have brought out the organ sound again.
Ah,
last time.
snap.
Oh well. We'll do that again soon.
Yep. But the point being that bass note kind of remains while the other chords are changing above it. It makes it almost kind of a cool drone kind of sound.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then the elaboration, it's just it seems to me like the role of these secondary dominant and secondary leading tone chords is mainly to add intrigue to the chord that it's supposed to function within the harmonic progression.
Yeah, and to add chromaticism to harmonic progression.
Yeah, color.
Yeah, add color, add chromaticism. The secondary dominants are often thought of as substitutes for diatonic chords, like the 5 of 5 as a substitute for 2, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason we would want to substitute a 5 of 5 for a 2 would be to add a level of chromaticism, which adds a little flavor and a little more color. The secondary 7 chords are not generally considered substitutions for anything. They're kind of just there to add color and to add chromaticism to our counterpoint, which is what all of this really is. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about chords, but what we're really doing is counterpoint.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a pretty theory-wise. That's a pretty robust thing to talk about, man. That's
pretty robust, but a lot of fun. If you ever get comfortable with them, adding these things into music you're writing or playing, really takes you to a whole nother level.
When I sat down to write that bumper track, I was kind of like, oh, where's this?
Right.
What's gonna happen? But I just really started having fun with it, and I really enjoyed it. And I would recommend anyone to try and mess around with these secondary leading tone chords.
Absolutely.
Pretty amazing stuff. Now, where do we go after here? Theory-wise, what's our next move?
Oh, shoot.
Shall we give them a teaser?
Well, although it may be hard to believe now, secondary 7 chords are not the height of chromaticism. We will be moving towards the height of chromaticism with chords that are really just sort of arbitrarily constructed for the sake of chromaticism.
I didn't even know we got off the...
How's that for a good tease?
I didn't even know we got off the ground on chromaticism. That's actually kind of nice.
Yeah.
Great, man. Well, another fun episode, man.
Yeah, indeed. It was a pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed it. We will see you next time.
Take care, guys.
One more time. 1, 7 of 2, 2. 1, 7 of 4, 4. You got it. Now go play around with some secondary leading tone chords. And don't forget, you can keep us in coffee with a monthly donation at patreon.com/musicstudent101 or with a single donation via the PayPal button on our website, musicstudent101.com.